Like, what's it like for you these days? Because as someone who's followed your comedy for a long time, it's almost like you were ahead of the curve in terms of what you were talking about. Because if you took stuff you did 10 or 20 years ago, it would still be just as fresh today.
No, that's terrible.
No, but I mean, is it terrible
say.
that like nothing's the same, everything's the same?
Yeah, I actually was flirting with the idea of calling the tour Everything's Changed, Nothing's Changed, but that kind of got voted down. But that was like actually the first idea I had for what the name of the tour should be. But yeah.
What do you make of all this? I mean, I know it's kind of a loaded question, but you're someone who definitely is well informed and versed in not only current events, but also just historical perspective, you know?
Well, that's, I guess you'd have to narrow it down if we're going to fit the interview into under 12 hours.
I mean, how do you approach the idea of what's going on in the White House from a perspective of a comedian, or is that just too much to even handle of just every day now?
Well, it definitely is different, and I talk about this, there's as you might imagine, there's some of my set I talk about Trump, and I say what's already been said by numerous people, but it's true, is that you can't really make fun of Trump, or I don't make fun of Trump necessarily as much as I do his fans and the culture that brought him here. It's less about, because you can't, he's so extremely egregious, and everything he does is immediately replaced by something else, and he's so inept and corrupt, like blatantly corrupt, and all those other things that it's there's nothing to say that kind of hasn't been said or isn't obvious to those of us who who see it and saw it a long time ago. He's such a blatant con man. I mean, there's no jokes or argument to be made with anybody. I mean, you either get it or you don't.
Well, it's just so absurd right now. It's almost like I almost feel like I'm in like Back to the Future 2 or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, the bulk of my stuff that has to do with that is more about his fans and the culture that brought him here, and less about, can you believe he said this?
Yeah.
And like the North Korean thing is, I had a whole bit, about when he made the shithole countries comment.
Yeah.
And we want more people from Norway, or like Norwegians, whatever. And I had a whole 5-minute bit on that I liked, but the shelf life on that was 3 weeks, because after a while you start doing it, after like 3 weeks, and people are looking at you like, yeah, that thing happened, felt like 6 years ago. We've moved on to 92 other awful things he said or done, and you might as well do a joke about the moon landing. Nobody gives a shit.
Well, as someone like myself, I grew up in upstate New York, and I live in southern Appalachia in western North Carolina, so I've been able to have quite a reflection on being on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line in my life. And I see it firsthand, the absurdity of the culture, and also the blind faith, and it's almost where when you try to talk, people just shut down. They don't interact, or they yell at you.
Yeah, and let's be fair. It's like that on both sides. But,
yeah, definitely. No, I agree.
Frustration.
Yeah.
If people are frustrated. Some people are like, how can you not see this? And other people are like, you're poisoned by the liberal mass media. Nothing you say, your sources are all suspect. And they've done an amazingly great job at I don't think it's necessarily hard to do, but they've done a fantastic job at just negating any credible source of information and making it seem, discrediting it. They've done a great job at that.
How has someone like yourself, who's a comedian and an entertainer, how has the stage you stand on changed in this era? Because I ask because, when I go to live shows for music or comedy, and I feel like some people are either tiptoeing around a little more or the crowd's a little more aggressive,
I can't speak to any of those other things, but for myself and what I do, I mean, I've never tiptoed around
Agreed.
anything. So, I mean, and look, we will. I'll find out shortly how the set is perceived. I know it works well. I've done. I don't know how many shows, 30, 40 to get the set together here in Brooklyn. And I've done the Comedy Festival in Chicago and Buster Fest Festival in San Francisco, and I've done a festival in Boston. So I know it works well there.
Yeah.
But those are all kind of progressive cities, and we'll see how it goes in some of the lesser progressive, lesser urban areas. Well, that remains to be seen.
Well, you've always you've always stuck to your guns as a comedian, but I wonder too about the comedian scene in general, because I'm starting to read articles about how comedians have always been very open-minded folks, especially in what they portray in the topics. But I wonder too, in this PC era, about comics being misunderstood and what the craft is they're actually doing.
Well, again, that is subjective and subjective to each individual, and I can't speak to anybody else and or for anybody else. So I can only tell you my approach hasn't changed. I doubt it ever will. If it ever got to the point where I thought it was, would have to change, then I'll just move somewhere where it doesn't have to change.
I guess more I was referring to the things I was reading, how certain comedians won't play colleges anymore because things have become so PC and things like that.
Oh, yeah, that's all legit. I mean, that's been a long time coming, and or I should say, it's been gradual, but definitely that is... colleges suck. That kind of crowd is terrible.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's anathema to comedy.
Yeah.
Those aren't fun. Those.
Well,
Say what?
I was gonna say, are you optimistic about the future?
It really vacillates depending on what day it is, what my mood is, and what information I've had access to. I mean, sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. And I would say, from firsthand experience, these kind of anecdotal stories of, people are more depressed, and kids are, kids are sadder. One of those things. I mean, I definitely see that and feel it and get it. It's they're twofold. When you have information like what ICE is doing and what the immigration, what would you call it?
Immigration Customs Enforcement.
Yeah, but not just ICE. I mean, I guess the immigration, not committee, but department, whatever it is. When you see what they're doing, there's two sides of how depressing to me it is, and one is that I find it, criminal and inhumane and not something that is part of what I understood America to be and the ideals America stood for. And so that's depressing on its own, that they're literally taking children who are breastfeeding in the act of breastfeeding from their mothers and separating them and then putting the parents in jail. I mean, that's just horrific to me. And then the other side to how depressing that is that there are a lot of people who are applauding that. A lot of my fellow countrymen are like, yeah, about time, good, fuck them. And that's, you know, I was just raised with different values, clearly. And so it's depressing on two levels.
And I would say too, like, what I see now emerging more is that there's, in all this chaos and bullshit, there are a lot more people coming off the sidelines in defense of good, but it's yet to be seen what kind of waves that will make. But
well, we'll find out in November how truly active and upset people are.
How do you keep from not letting, like, the frustration get to you? I mean, I know obviously.
Well, sometimes I don't, and it's difficult, and you know, you just you try to focus. You know, I have a new baby now, and you know, I try to. She's completely innocent. She doesn't know. She has no concept of hate and selfishness, and she doesn't know what those things are, and she doesn't know. She's not. She doesn't know tribalism. You know, she doesn't know you're at this and you're not at that, and these are good, and what you are is great, and those are bad. Like, she doesn't understand any of those concepts. I'm going to try to keep those concepts away from her as long as possible. And
can you hear me?
Raising her in Brooklyn, which is a very diverse, progressive community, and you know, and I'll be, and her mother will be there to counteract some of this shit that is out there, and you know, I mean, that I you know, want to leave her a better country than the one she was born into.
Yeah. How has being a new father changed your perspective, not only as a person but also as an artist?
I mean, 15% more dad jokes, I guess. I mean, it hasn't. It's not. There's no. I just see it. I see. I guess maybe more of a urgency to the stuff. Whereas I can read the news, shake my head, go, God, this is awful. What have we become? Who are we? And then before I had a kid, just sort of go, no, this is terrible, and then flip over to the sports scores.
Yeah.
Now you kind of there's more of a, you know, it resonates. It has a bit more of an impact, but I wouldn't say like severely. It's not like I had a kid and all of a sudden the veil was lifted from me, you know, from my eyes. I mean, I've always been skeptical and cynical, and I just, you know, you know, I can only hope that her upbringing is not as shitty as mine was, and that, you know, as I said, leave a better community and country for her to live in. Than,
well, it's like one of those things too.